the biggest one is stigma, or like just abortion in general. I mean, typically that's what people's minds jump to, so I mean, might as well address it. Really, it boils down to people misunderstand the abortion process. They misunderstand what it is. They typically misunderstand the medication used, if it's a medication abortion, or the reasoning or logic people would like have to then, or to have to access abortion past 10 weeks, you know, typically what we consider surgical abortions. And then of course misinformation about the average rate or like point in the pregnancy that people have abortions. We know people aren't really having abortions past the second trimester, you know, like third trimester abortions are definitely not happening unless it's really actually necessary, you know. And at that point, who should be impacting or influencing that decision of the process other than the people directly involved and the medical providers? So that's one big misconception. I think another big misconception is around sex education. Typically people, again, when they hear sex ed, they're like, oh, my kid doesn't need to know what goes where and when, type of thing. But again, it's like, you know, 6-year-olds do need to know the name of their body parts. Like, they actually have to, like developmentally, that's safe, you know, and necessary. 10-year-olds should know how biologically pregnancy occurs, even if they haven't started puberty like they're going to the next 5 years. Like there are massive developmental milestones and like educational benchmarks that youth need to like reach and achieve to ensure that they're developing a healthy self-identity and a strong level of self-esteem and confidence in themselves, because one day they're going to have to make their own decisions, and so that's going to start in childhood. So that's, I think, what I like to say about sex ed and that misconception that it's like they don't need to know what it is. It's like, well, they're not actually learning what you think they're learning, you know, like everything is brand new. They don't have a bias for sex yet, like they don't know anything, so it's like it's fresh. So the law the law, to Avi, that's one big one. I would say stigma is a big one. You know, like a lot of people don't realize that like the Planned Parenthood clinics offer more than just abortion, right? And if they grew up or like hold a lot of value in being anti-abortion or not supporting it, they're not going to see it as a resource for any other part of their sexual and reproductive health. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges as well. Like, you know, like whether you are pro or against abortion, like, and if you are sexually active, you need to be getting tested regularly, especially if you're with more than one partner, right? Like it's just for your own health. So I guess I would say that. Fear too, generally speaking, because a lot of people don't like the youth quote unquote empowered, right? They don't want them to have all the information so that they can make decisions that impact themselves healthfully and whoever else in their life. Because typically we do want to maintain, under capitalism, under the oppressive structures that we know, like we do want to maintain a workforce, a general population that is okay with the status quo, right? And a lot of kids nowadays, as they grow up with the internet and mass communication and sharing experiences with people across the world, they're seeing that, like, you know, the impacts of capitalism in our current economic model is not necessarily beneficial to all. And so they're starting to make decisions that reflect those values, and, you know, people who make the money don't like that. So I think that's another, sex education is really crucial for that, because it really starts to develop, you know, their own sense of identity and their own confidence and courage in their own decision making. So I think that fear is a big one. And then just, so under misunderstanding, like people don't know what hormone care is. You know, they don't understand what the difference is between puberty blockers or, you know, T or E or facial feminization surgery, or like any of the surgeries that adults typically would get if they access it. It's just, they don't know. And so like that level of lack of knowledge is enough to make them scared that they don't, you know, like preventing them from learning more, if that makes sense. So I guess those would be like the biggest barriers, with the law still being number one. Yeah, so there was a point in history where Planned Parenthoods weren't allowed to get Title X funding, so that they couldn't provide like birth controls and IUDs and stuff for free or low cost for low-income folks. Right now, obviously, we can't provide abortion, right? Because the law is not allowing us to provide abortions. So stuff like that, it's more so limiting the scope of what we are able to provide for patients, when we know that like the full range of scope is what's medically necessary and like holistically right. But the law is like establishing parameters on us that is preventing us from doing that. If you want to talk clinically, like you can talk about, you know, how many unintended pregnancies, like the rate of unintended pregnancies, how it's shifted in the last 5 to 10 years, right? We could talk about, we could look into the numbers of how many people are using LARC, long-acting reversible contraceptives, like the IUD or the implant. We could look at the numbers on how many people gotten them in the last 4 years versus how many people got them in the years prior, their age range. You know, we could also look at the rates of STI transmission in the community. Like we know people are sexually active, right? Like if we're able to be doing our job appropriately and hopefully correctly, we would see those rates come down as more people get educated, as more people access those services, as more people utilize condoms and dental dams and barrier methods to prevent STI transmission. So like that's one way we can view it. And granted, we know, like we look at the numbers, like, yeah, we're doing good, you know? And then you can look at it from like the educational advocacy side, like as more and more people become more open-minded to the trans community, or like understanding better like the developmental milestones that youth need to be reaching for when it comes to sexual and reproductive health and information. Like as people become more aware of it, they will become more accepting of it, and that means we're doing our job right, you know? Or granted, maybe they don't like it, it's different from what they grew up with. That's totally understandable as well. But at the end of the day, like we are still progressing forward in time, and like the levels of communication we have, the tech we have is way different than it was 20 years ago. And so like the way we need to be presenting information is shifting. The information itself is changing, you know, like we know so much more about biology in our bodies now than we did 30 years ago. So I guess like knowing it's having an impact, you know, is like how many people join the programs, how many people come to events, how many people are donating, how many people are advocating for our services to continue the community, how many people are showing support for the work we do, you know, that type of thing. At the core of it, like a lot of people typically will be more upset at the language itself than what the content is, if that makes sense. Like more people would rather not hear the word penis and vulva and vagina than hear the fact that like kids at 6 years old need to know that so that they can talk about sexual abuse if it occurs, right? Once you present it that way, then they're like, oh, okay, I kind of see what you're saying, like I understand it, you know, stuff like that. Or people saying like, oh, my kid doesn't need to know what how pregnancy works, they didn't need to know about vaginal penetration, right? Well, technically they need to, because even though they may not be engaging in it, they may have friends that are engaging in penetrative activities that can result in pregnancy. And if nobody's actually really presented that information of like sperm meeting an egg is gonna result in XYZ, they're gonna have an unintended pregnancy way earlier than they wanted, right? And so like there is a material reality with material consequences to them not having this information. And like that's not something we can just sweep under the rug. Personally, I love being a community educator. Like I love my peer education program. I love being able to talk to the kids and like teach them and like kiki together. Especially because I'm only like 5-6 years removed from their age, so I'm just like, you know, we basically besties. That's one of my big stuff. And then I love going into community organizations and teaching. So like I mean, Centro Hispano is always gonna have a special place in my heart. I worked with them first. They kind of helped shift and like, you know, bring me to where I am in my career and like knowing what I want to do with my life. And so I love going in and doing workshops for their parents and workshops for their youth, and integrating sex ed into their summer camp programs for their middle schoolers, you know, like really just getting that information out. That, so fulfilling, love it. Other more fulfilling stuff, I love walking around Knoxville and people telling me they know me. I love feeling like a local mini celebrity just because I'm vain and self-centered in that way. And you know what? I think it's harmless, so we're good. Since we are an organization that does deal with topics and services that typically are very polarizing in today's climate and culture, I would like strongly say that our supporters are pretty pro anything that we're been offering or servicing. You know, like most individuals like that are supportive of Planned Parenthood or donate either are pro-abortion in some capacity or understand that sex ed is crucial in the community, or they realize that, you know, like the trans community is super underserved and they do want to ensure they're getting gender care, gender affirming hormone care, you know, that kind of stuff. Granted, we do, of course, there are supporters that do also see the need for abortion, even if they are anti-abortion. You know, like I've had a lot of conversations with individuals that are like, I personally would never have an abortion, would never want my partner or my kids to have an abortion unless they wanted it. It's like, they say like, I would not want it for them, but I still see that like taking it away is only going to worsen lives. And so it's like, we need to still have that access and that opportunity. So it's kind of wild to see that, but yeah, like, because it is of such a polarizing topic. Like most of the supporters you technically would see or think of would skew one way or another. I am Gen Z, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, y'all got me. But then obviously like our organization does have like weekly and monthly newsletters, like advocacy does their own, and then as a state organization we have our own, and then like people can sign up and subscribe for like the national organization newsletters. But like of course these emails and newsletters have information about like we're doing phone banking as election season comes up at this place if you want to help support this candidate's campaign. We're going to do canvassing for this candidate. It'll also have like, there's going to be a fundraising event where Crafty Bastard's going to donate XY amount of their proceeds. Adopo's been like supportive of us, stuff like that. So like just like giving that information out for people to, see. Of course, there's a limit to how much communication and interaction we can have with people that don't actively work in your circle that you see every day, I love Planned Parenthood. I love, or at least specifically the education department. I'm obsessed with providing sex education. I love it. It's been so much fun for me for the last 2 years. I definitely see a long-term career in sexology and like sexual education, sexuality. I think it's just cool. Like the stuff we do is like radical, like in a tubular way, because it's so like kind of taboo and stigmatized that it's like, I don't know, I find a little pleasure in being like, you don't want to talk about it, but I'll talk about it, and there's nothing actually even wrong with it. It's just a little taboo, kind of breaking that down. So yeah, I think just being able to do what we do and like not being actively, I'll just say being able to do what we do and still being able to do it. That's what I like about this organization, all that. So my email, so people can always email me specifically. Since I'm the health educator and condom distribution coordinator for East Tennessee, if anybody ever needs free external condoms, internal condoms, dental dams, lubes, and latex-free condoms, there we go, that's what it was, the other thing, I was like, specifically. They would just email me at nmonarrez@pptnm.org. Or they could always call our helpline that you can find on the website. You can find literally anywhere that you look up PPTNM. That's directly to the call center, so they'll always be able to redirect whoever calls to whoever they need to be with. I don't know, so yes and no. The weird thing is like, I love to say that like this was my dream job since I was 12, 13, but if you were to ask me at 12, 13 that this was a job I was gonna aim for, I would say, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? Like 13 years old, I didn't know that being a sex educator is a thing. I'm like, what? Like I just knew that like, since I was 12, I've always been interested in topics of gender, sexuality, sex, like acts, STIs, like transmissions, like everything that had to do with the body, been obsessed with. I don't know why, it's just fascinating. Also, our bodies are just freaking cool. Like as they transform during pregnancy and during puberty, like the changes our bodies go through, it's wild. And so like I always knew I wanted to work in something in that capacity, working either with queer folks or something with sex education or something sex information. I knew at the time, Planned Parenthood existed and they did STI testing, and I was like, I knew that I could go to them for information, but at the time I didn't realize that like they had peer ed programs for high school students. I didn't know that they have health educators that could go out into the community. And like as I came out of undergrad, I was like, oh, that's what I like doing. I like doing that, and like, so it just kind of really aligned very well, and I was really lucky. So if people are interested in learning more about the election season coming up and like where a lot of the candidates' values are as they pertain to reproductive rights and sexual health, specifically for like statewide elections and citywide elections, like for here and Asheville and Memphis, the website for TAP, Tennessee Advocates for Planned Parenthood, has a really good, beautiful like layout for like everything about it, and the build trackers and stuff, so it's really nice. Definitely would ask people to check that out. So